Imagine a specific kind of person. They can fix a leaking sink, reset the Wi-Fi, and quote a 90s movie line, all in the same afternoon. When technology breaks, they don't panic. They just sigh, grab a screwdriver, and say, "It's fine, I'll figure it out." Maybe you know someone who rolls their eyes at both boomers and millennials. Too young to be traditional, yet too old to be trendy. They survived dial-up internet, cassette tapes, and corporate layoffs, emerging on the other side skeptical, dry, and quietly competent. That's Gen X. But beneath the sarcasm and the legendary self-reliance, there is a fascinating psychology at play. This is a generation shaped by independence, uncertainty, and the experience of being slightly overlooked. Whether you are Gen X or just trying to understand one, there are patterns here that run much deeper than nostalgia and flannel shirts. It starts with the independent realist. This is the Gen Xer who grew up letting themselves into an empty house after school. No constant check-ins, no GPS tracking, just a note on the fridge and a microwave dinner. They learned early that if something needed to get done, they'd probably have to do it themselves. Fast forward to adulthood. They don't ask for help easily. They don't overshare. When work gets chaotic, they shrug and handle it. When relationships get complicated, they quietly assess rather than explode. Psychologically, this comes from early autonomy. Research shows that kids who navigate responsibilities on their own develop elite problem-solving skills. But it comes with a shadow side, a tendency toward emotional self-containment. They learned not to depend too heavily on systems or people. Maybe that's you. You pride yourself on being capable, but sometimes you carry more than you admit. Independence feels safe. Vulnerability feels like a glitch in the system. Then we have the skeptical observer. This Gen Xer has seen it all. Economic recessions, corporate downsizing, and cultural shifts that promised the world and delivered a bill. When a new trend comes along promising to change everything, they simply raise an eyebrow. They aren't cynical. They are calibrated. In conversations, they listen more than they speak. They don't jump into outrage cycles or online drama. They've watched enough cultural waves rise and fall to know that most things are temporary. Psychologically, this is advanced pattern recognition. Growing up during rapid change builds adaptive skepticism. It isn't rebellion, it's emotional efficiency. Why invest heavily in every social shift when you've seen how quickly the narrative can flip? You might notice this in yourself. You're hard to impress and you don't panic easily. But that quiet emotional steadiness is often mistaken for detachment. Perhaps the most unique type is the cultural bridge. Gen X sits between an analog childhood and a digital adulthood. They are the only generation that truly remembers life before the internet, but also built their careers inside of it. Think of it like a dual-boot computer. They can run two different operating systems simultaneously. You'll see them explaining social media trends to older relatives, while reminding younger coworkers that not everything needs to be posted for validation. Psychologically, this creates immense cognitive flexibility. When you've experienced two different versions of the world, your brain gets comfortable switching codes. But there's a twist. Being the bridge can feel invisible. You aren't the largest generation, and you aren't the loudest. You quietly translate between worlds, and eventually, that invisibility becomes part of your identity. We don't need attention, you tell yourself. But underneath that is a subtle, lingering awareness of being the middle child of history. This leads to the quiet loyalist. Gen X relationships often run deep but small. They don't necessarily need massive friend groups or digital likes to feel seen. They won't call every day, and they certainly won't post sentimental captions. But when something serious happens, they show up. This stems from growing up with less constant digital validation. Friendship wasn't maintained through a screen. It was maintained through shared experiences and showing up in person. Psychologically, this builds long-term attachment patterns based on reliability rather than intensity. They don't burn bright and fast. They endure. Finally, there is the ironic minimalist. This Gen Xer doesn't need to announce their identity. They wear what's comfortable. They're suspicious of productivity hacks, and they've learned that chasing constant growth doesn't always equal happiness. After witnessing corporate ambition culture rise and fall, they've recalibrated their values. When you grow up watching material success wobble during recessions, you learn not to anchor your identity solely to status. You develop internal anchors instead. That's why Gen X humor is so dry and self-deprecating. It's a pressure valve for navigating uncertainty without emotional overload. But here is the most important thing to realize. Underneath the self-sufficiency and the sarcasm is a generation that learned to process emotions quietly. Therapy wasn't normalized. Emotional language wasn't mainstream. So, feelings became private projects. This creates a paradox. A person who is strong, competent, and resilient, but sometimes unsure how to ask for support when the weight gets too heavy. If you're Gen X, you know how to handle things, but occasionally, you might wonder what it would feel like to not have to. And if you're not Gen X, maybe you now see why they don't overshare or jump on every social bandwagon. It's not indifference, it's lived calibration. So which type feels familiar? The realist? The observer? The bridge? Maybe you're a mix of them all. Gen X psychology isn't loud. It doesn't demand the spotlight. It's subtle, adaptive, and quietly durable. And maybe that's the most Gen X thing of all. Reflect for a moment on what shaped your independence. What made you skeptical? Those parts of your resilience are your greatest strengths. Just make sure they haven't become your armor. Because sometimes, understanding the psychology behind a generation is really just a way of understanding yourself. And that is always worth noticing.